to another episode of the DFS Army Killshot podcast. I'm Kyle Marley. With me this week is Monk MMA, and we're going to break down this UFC Vegas 67 card for you guys today. If you're not familiar with Monk, he works over at the MMA Engine channel on YouTube. Him and Rebecchi over there in chat, they do a show each week. Go check them out for sure. But Monk has been tracking these stats, these different stats for DraftKings over the last couple years, so he could tell you how often the main event is in the optimal lineup, how often a specific salary is in the optimal lineup. So I'm excited to have him on the show today and talk about some of these stats. How are you doing today, Monk? And how are you feeling about this first card of the year?
Man, Kyle, thank you first of all for having me on. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to doing this one. Obviously love the DFS heavy stuff. Looking forward to this card. Looking forward to this year. Starting it off, it feels fresh. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's at zero, or if you're that optimist substitute teacher, everybody starts the year at 100%. So we are all there. Speaking of the curtain jerker, I want to throw this out there. The curtain jerker itself, the first fight of the night. In the last 2 years, we've had a first fight of the night. Believe it or not, 85 times. That has made optimal. Someone from that fight has made optimal lineup just 44.71% of the time. That is the second lowest out of any fight. Number 7 is lowest. Number 1 fight curtain jerkers tied with number 9, 44.71%. A little bit lower than you would imagine.
I like my curtain jerkers.
Exactly. Yeah. You love to see that number above 50, but
though.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have to see. This one is a perfect week to look to play that curtain jerker, if you don't mind me saying. We got Priscilla Cachoeira the first fight.
Let's go right into it then. We got this curtain jerker. We have to start off the card, to start off the year, we have Sijara Eubanks minus 240 against Priscilla Cachoeira plus 200. I'm okay with either side of this fight on DraftKings because I think they both have paths to a high score. With Eubanks, her game plan should be to go out there and wrestle, grapple as heavy as she can. As long as she is in top control on the ground, she should be cruising here. Cachoeira won't have much to offer off her back. But if she's not able to get takedowns, that's where Cachoeira comes into play, because I think the striking's pretty close, but Cachoeira has a lot more power than Eubanks. And every time she goes out there, she looks a little bit stronger to me. Maybe she's on some special supplements. But I think she is in play for a high score if she's able to get the TKO. I also think she can get 10x if she's able to win a striking-based decision. But at the same time, it's not going to be a fight that I'm making a point to get into my lineups, because I could see it going the distance where both of them have a little bit of success, and I'm picking Eubanks to win. And she's a little bit more expensive at 8,800 this week. I will say she's my preferred play since I'm picking her to win, but I'm not against going a little bit overweight to Cachoeira because there's not a lot of underdogs I like on the card this weekend. How are you feeling about this first fight of the night, Monk? Do you like either side more than the other?
You know, I would if these salaries were a bit more narrow than they are. Eubanks is just far too expensive. That's the bottom line for me in this one. Surprisingly, Eubanks in their past 5, I switched over. I'm now tracking very closely just the last 5 UFC fights. I'm still tracking everything, but I'm paying attention more to the last 5 fights. And in those last 5, Eubanks has 2 wins, and in those 2 wins, she's averaging 106.9 points. That is 11 points up from her career average of 95 points per win. Cachoeira, I mean, insane scores, especially for this division, 100 points per win. She gives up 116.87 in her last loss. Overall, she gives up 117.5 in her UFC DFS career. 117.5 points per loss, allows 5.3 points per minute. That's the only reason I would think to roster Eubanks here, but she's just far too expensive. I'll get Cachoeira a bit in the lower end if I need some, a bit of salary relief just for these volatile TKO numbers that she has. This power index that you mentioned, 3rd highest on the card overall. So in my opinion, anything could happen. I like Eubanks for the win. I'm with you here. 3-round decision. But if it doesn't go to 3 rounds, I mean, Cachoeira, just a 10x, she'd only need 74 points. And like you said, averaging 76 per decision win in her last 4. So she's right there.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a win that would not hit 10x that $7,400 price tag. And she has 2 first-round knockouts, a second-round knockout. If she can have that success here, then she's going to be competing for the optimal lineup. I just don't know how much I'll get to this. I think with my hand builds, it'll be more of a 6th, spot in my lineup based on who can fit. If I'm using, 150 lineups on the DFS Army optimizer, then I'd probably want to limit both sides to like 20%, maybe 25% max, and just let the optimizer do its thing. If you don't have an optimizer, go sign up right now, dfsarmy.com. Use promo code Sleeveless. That'll save you 10% every month. I think you guys will like it. We got an awesome community in the Discord as well. But yeah, I think this is a good fight to just let the optimizer do its thing, as long as the projected points aren't too crazy on either one, which you can adjust if you need to. I'd be fine with 10 to 20% of either one here. But give me Eubanks to get the win. And then in this next fight of the night, I think this is a really good GPP fight. We got Charles Johnson minus 340 against Jimmy Flick plus 280. Fight doesn't go to decision on this one is minus 225. So they think about 70% of the time this fight's going to end early. And both of them have a path to victory to end inside the distance. Do you have a preferred play in this one, Monk?
I do like this one. It's very volatile. Jimmy Flick, obviously, coming off retirement. 2 years it's been since he last fought. When he got that win against Cody Durden, in which I had to triple check. He gave up almost 7 points a minute and scored less than 1. Still got the win. Still scored over 90 in that first round. Sub. So he was losing till he wasn't. And that's what I think we're going to get with Jimmy Flick here. Charles Johnson, I don't like how wide this line is. I mean, we're trusting Charles Johnson here. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Looked decent against Muhammad Mokaev, who seems, in my opinion, to be someone to reckon with in the flyweight division. But Charles Johnson hung with him. I mean, he got taken down like a gazillion times in that fight, probably 12 times. Gave up a ton of points, but did not get finished. And that's kind of how I'm looking here. If this one goes to decision, Charles Johnson probably going to win. I think Flick needs a sub here to get the victory. But I'm not really impressed with Charles Johnson's numbers DK wise, 2.3 points a minute. Jimmy Flick, someone that's going to have to show me before I really buy into it after being gone for 2 years. How can we trust that? But at 7,200, it's pretty easy. It's a little easier to trust than $9,000 for Energy Charles Johnson. So I think this is one I don't feel too comfortable saying I'm going to pass on it, but I'm going to probably be under the field on this one as a whole. I'll probably be over actually on Jimmy Flick, trying to go a bit contrarian, hoping he gets that sub finish. But I'm looking to probably be under for Charles Johnson. I'm going to have to see it basically before I believe it from either guy.
Interesting. And I am cool going a little bit overweight on the Flick side because I think he has one of the higher ceilings as an underdog at $7,200, because if he wins this fight, I think it's got to be an early submission in the first or second round while they're not super slick and while he's fresh. And you mentioned he's coming off a 2-year layoff. We don't know how this guy's going to look, especially the longer into the fight that it goes. So it really is a submission or bust type of fight for Flick, because I don't think he has the wrestling to just dictate where the fight takes place for 3 rounds. And if he can't get that submission, which Johnson has never been submitted, I just think he is going to be in for a world of trouble on the feet. And I think it's a matter of time before Johnson gets a TKO if Flick is unable to get the takedown. So I do prefer Johnson in this one. But at the same time, I'm okay going overweight to both of them, because if Flick wins, he's probably going to be on that optimal lineup with 90 plus points if he can get it done. I don't want to invest too much in that happening. So I'll probably be around field weight so I don't get burned too much. And then I'll try to go overweight on the Johnson side. But it's a card where I like a lot of favorites. So we'll see how much Johnson I can get. There are favorites I like more than him. So I'll just be mixing around my combos, see who can get in there, and hopefully I can get lucky. Next one on the card, we have Dan Argueta minus 600 against Nick Aguirre plus 425. Nick is taking this fight on less than a week's notice to make his UFC debut. He's got 7 wins, 0 losses. 6 of those wins are in the first round. One of them is like in the first 2 minutes of round 2. So this guy's never seen a round 3. The competition that I was seeing him fight looked like they just pulled these guys out of the crowd, or it's just like an amateur type bout is what it more so looked like, but they were professional fights. But it was him just dominating these guys that were really low level. It's hard to tell how good he is. Most of his work came on the ground, and it wasn't really any wrestling techniques that I saw him get it there. It was just bad fighters that he was fighting. And I just don't know how he's going to have that same success getting the fight to the ground against Argueta here because he's the better wrestler. I think he's the more powerful striker, more likely to get the knockout, better grappler. So I just have to go with the Argueta side because I don't know enough about this Nick guy, to be honest with you. And if they're not changing Argueta's price tag at $8,600 on DraftKings, which I've never seen them do for someone who stayed on the slate, then he's going to be the best value on the slate as a -600 favorite here. And I believe he's like -120 inside the distance, something like that. So I like him a lot. He's probably a top 2 or 3 play on the slate for me. And I don't see me taking any shots on this underdog unless it's, unless I have 150 lineups in a deep GPP. But how do you see this one going down, Monk?
I couldn't agree more. Excuse me. I'm not going to have this Nick guy in my lineups unless I'm going deep, like deep 150s. 20 maxes, he's not going to see the light of day for me. Argueta is going to be my one of my highest plays of the week now at this point. I mean, the strength of schedule here, I don't know anything. I'm a stats guy, big, heavy stats guy, big, heavy DFS stats guy. I have no DFS stats for Nick Aguirre. 42.83 strength of schedule in his last 5. I do measure strength of schedule just like the BCS does for, or just like the NCAA does for BCS football. I use the same calculation for these guys' last 5 fights and their last 5 opponents. Nick Aguirre has one of the lowest strength of schedules I've ever seen, like Trayshawn Gore levels of low strength of schedule, 42.83. It's the second lowest on the card, only to another Nick Fiore, who we will be talking about later. He has the worst one, but Slick Nick here is actually the second worst. And also the other thing that I'll mention before we can move on and not spend too much time on this one, I just did track in the past 2 years, replacement fighters, what I'm calling replacement fighters, have a win rate of just 35.6%. So guys that come in on a replacement, as of now, I don't have a time frame for this stat. There is no parameter for that. It's just, has it been since 2021? And are you on Tapology's page as to, falling off the fight, whatever? 35%. Opponents of replacement fighters, 60% win rate, 61% win rate. So that's nothing to trifle with. That is a huge number. And there are a ton of guys that are replacement fighters this week. Long story short, I don't think Nick Aguirre is going to be one of the 35% to win against Argueta. I think Argueta is a must play. And like you said, one of the best values on the card.
Well said. And I love the heavy stats. Keep them coming. I know the listeners will like it as well. All right, let's get into this next one. We got Alan Nascimento -340 against Carlos Hernandez, +280. And this is one I just don't see me getting too much. I think that Nascimento is the better grappler. I think that's the biggest advantage in this whole fight is Nascimento's grappling. And Carlos Hernandez doesn't have great takedown defense. So even though Nascimento's not a great wrestler, I think as long as he is consistent trying to get the fight to the ground, I think he eventually can. And if he's able to, I just see him grinding out the minutes. But at like 9,200 or whatever he's priced at this week, I just don't know how he gets there unless he's able to get that submission, because he's usually not doing enough work minute to minute. And if he's able to get this guy down, maybe he just grinds or he backpacks him on the ground for 3 minutes and doesn't do a whole lot of striking. And that's not going to score as much as we would like it to for a grappler. So I don't love Nascimento on this card. He's only got a +175 inside the distance line. So it's going to be hard to pay up for him. I definitely like other favorites more. I don't hate the fade on him. I'm not going to X him out of my player pool, but I definitely won't be making it a point to get him in my hand builds either. And I think this Hernandez kid, I could see him winning a striking match. I did love the fight between Nascimento and the Contender Series fight with Paiva. I watched that every single time these guys fight just because it was such a good one. And if that type of fight happens here, then sure, Nascimento can win on the feet. He could be the higher volume striker, but I just don't see this being that type of fight. And I like the technique from Hernandez more on the feet. If he can stuff takedowns, I think he's very live to win a decision here. So he's my preferred play really in all formats. I just don't see much of a ceiling for him. So I prefer him more for a cash game where he can go out there and score 60 points and we're okay with it. But 60 points probably not going to cut it on, for the 100K lineup. So this is a fight I'm looking to avoid unless you can change my mind. How do you feel about this one, Monk?
I'm probably not going to be able to change your mind on this one. I completely agree. I'm picking Nascimento. I do think he's going to get the job done, whether he gets the sub or not. It has yet to be shown that he will score well if he gets, if he gets a sub, if he gets a finish outside of the first round. That doesn't necessarily mean much with a guy that only scores, less than 2.5 points a minute. You're still looking at like 90 points total. And when he's 9,100, that's not even 10x at 90 points. So just because he can get a finish, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily targeting him. I will target him to win, but I'm more interested for GPPs in the Carlos Hernandez side of things, especially in like a 20 max, 150 max, something like that. Like you said, if he can stuff takedowns, if this goes to decision, he can score decently. 77 is what he scored in his fight against Victor Altamirano, which at 7,100 is 11x, basically 11x. And it could be very sneakily on the optimal lineup if he gets that win. Let's see. I did have a stat here. I'll find it later. But Hernandez scoring much better than Nascimento. 3.15 points per minute is what he put up against Altamirano, and Altamirano seemed decent against a guy like Daniel Da Silva, which isn't saying much. But Hernandez put up, let's see, what is this? 0.83 points per minute in takedowns and control time against Altamirano. So he only allowed 0.5 points per minute in those categories. So that isn't too terrible at all. I'm just trying to find a little bit of what I call salary voodoo here on this fight. Nascimento, let's see. When $9,100 wins, when $7,100 wins, it makes the optimal lineup 63.64% of the time. So it really doesn't matter when you're that low of a salary on your score. If you put up a win at like 80 points, you're 10, 11 Xing, you have a good chance of making the optimal. So I'm more focused on Hernandez here, even though I like Nascimento to win.
Yeah, that sold me a little bit more just on the Hernandez side. I wouldn't be as afraid to throw him into, my 20 entry max lineups this week because, spoiler alert, I don't think I have any underdogs winning on this card. The one underdog I picked got scratched. So just for that reason alone, I'm going to have to go with any underdog I think is live. And if it is a favorites card, then you might not even need 6 wins to get it done, or 60 and a win could make it happen. So I'm cool with that. I like Hernandez, I guess, in all formats. All right, next one on the card. I'm really looking forward to this one from a watching purpose as a fan, but I just don't know that I want to target it heavily on DraftKings. We got Javid Basharat minus 350 versus Mateus Mendoza plus 290. I mean, when I saw that Basharat was fighting a guy that I hadn't heard of with a minus 350 price tag, I was like, all right, well, it's going to be a setup fight. I'm sure Basharat will just walk through him. But when I watched this Mendoza kid, he's good. He's good everywhere. I think he's got solid striking. He's really good on the ground. He's got some good wrestling. So I just think that they're doing him, a disservice by matching him up with Basharat here, because Basharat looks like the real deal. This guy's good everywhere. It's hard to find a way for Mendoza to win this fight because of how good Basharat is. But I think he sticks around in the UFC for a long time. I wouldn't hate a play on Mendoza here as an underdog. He could get a finish on the feet or the ground. And I do think it'll be close minute to minute. And that's kind of why I don't like Basharat super, super high at his price, because he's only scored, I believe, 66 and 83 in his 2 decision wins. So he's just not doing enough in decisions. And I don't think it's going to be a whole lot easier against this kid here. So it's more so relying on the finish for him. He is plus 120 inside the distance, so that makes him more playable. I want to invest in him in general, but I don't know that DraftKings is the place to do it, especially on this card. So this is going to be more so of a pass for me, but I am picking Basharat to get the win. Who do you like in this one, Monk?
Well, I did mention this on my game theory show that I do put out once a week for these fights. Javid Basharat is a guy that I've tried to fade. I really don't know why, but I've tried to fade him at basically 2 fights in a row, and I've paid for that. I have not gotten paid off of that, that's for sure. I have paid. But that said, he's not done anything for DraftKings. Less than 3 points a minute. This guy, 74, as you alluded to, 74 points per win so far in his 2 UFC wins. He's 9,200. I think the price is right for a cash game, because I do think he probably wins this fight a ton of times out of 10, does Javid Basharat here. So I think it's right for cash. I don't mind Basharat for cash at all. But like you said, I don't know much about this Mendoza guy. He is 7K. He did absolutely demolish whoever he fought. Ashik Ajim in his DWCS fight smashed him in less than a minute. So the stats for this fight have to be thrown out the window because, I mean, if you take them for what they are, he scored almost 30 points a minute. So throw the stats out for this one for Mendoza. We just have to see what he can do. As of now, much like you said, Basharat has shown me too much that I can't fade him, especially to a newcomer. So Mateusz is going to have to show me what's up before I can roster him in his next fight. Maybe if we're lucky, he'll get somebody coming in and he can showcase some of his skills. But man, getting paired against Basharat as your first fight in the UFC, I don't know. I don't know what kind of message they're trying to send to this guy, but that's a tough go. So give me Basharat for cash, but I'm not interested for GPPs. Maybe a little Mateusz, like you were saying, for the big KO potential for like 150 maxes. But even at a 20 max, I mean, that's a spot I don't even know if it's 1 or 2, 5 or 10% maybe. So give me Basharat here for the win.
Yeah, if I'm making 20 or less lineups, I just don't see me getting to this fight much because I see Basharat winning with like 75, 80 points.
Exactly.
And at his price, that's probably just not going to get it done. So I just want to watch this one. It's two good talents. It should be a fun fight, but hopefully that's the case as Basharat scores 80 points and doesn't make the optimal. All right, next one on the card. I do like this one a lot, but more so on one side, we got Mateusz Rebecchi minus 730 against Nick Fiore, who you mentioned earlier is plus 530. And man, this looks like a setup fight for Rebecchi. This Fiore kid, he's never been out of the first round. He's only fighting scrubs. He's making it look easy. He's training with Calvin Kattar, Rob Font at the New England Cartel. So that's good to see. It's just, I haven't seen enough from him. There's not enough film out there on him. And the one fight that I saw was against somebody that everyone beats. And he's beat this guy by submission. He's beat him by TKO. He's fought him twice. I just don't think this is a fight for him to win. I think the UFC wants to highlight this Rebecchi kid. He looks pretty good. I think he looks really good on the ground. His striking looked pretty good. He's got power on the feet. He looks strong. He looks like he's going to be the better wrestler. So I just like Rebecchi here. He's got a minus 225 inside the distance line. He's got plus 110 wins in round one. So there's really nothing to like about this kid. He is the highest priced fighter at 9,400, but that's only 9,400. Sometimes we get $9,600 fighters. Sometimes we get 9,700. So he's probably my favorite fighter on the slate if I can afford it. The only thing is that I'm not picking underdogs to win on this slate, so it's going to be hard to afford, but I'm going to try and make it a point to get some leverage on him. I would guess he's around 50% on. So I'd want him in at least half of my lineups. I like him in cash games. You see anything different in this one, Monk?
Not at all. Seems like a setup fight for Rebecchi here. I guess we'll find out. Again, I'm just going back to my 35 or whatever % win rate for replacement fighters. That's a big stat that I am leaning on this week, especially, I just started incorporating it into kind of what, if you want to call it capping, I just picking fights for me. I don't necessarily cap like everybody else in the community does, but for DFS, that's a huge stat for what I'm looking for. Now, Rebecchi, like I said, only 3 minutes. A lot of his stats have to be thrown out, but if you want to keep him in over 5 a minute, 106 is what he would have scored in his DWCS fight. He would have allowed only 0.4 points per minute, scored like almost 5 points a minute, all in takedowns and control time, basically. That's what I'm looking for here. Either a club and sub type deal, takedown first, takedown in the club and sub. If we can get a takedown and a finish and a first round, inside a minute finish here, that would be a gigantic score, even for 9,400. So I think this guy's got a huge ceiling. Everybody's going to be on him. You're going to have to make a choice here. You're either going to have to be contrarian and fade him down to basically nothing or 10, 20%, or you're going to have to go way over. Because like you said, Kyle, 50% ownership is right where I'm thinking, if not more. So in my head, you got to be either like 80 or 90, or you got to be like 10. So you got to take a stand here. I think Rebecchi smashes at 9,400.
Yeah, I'd rather be on closer to the 90% rather than the 10 personally. But you're right, man. If he goes out there and wins with 75 points and you're on the 10% Rebecchi side, then you got a really good chance at cleaning up on this slate. I just think he goes out there and dominates this kid. So I'd rather lock him in, to be honest with you. All right, next one on the card, we have Claudio Ribeiro, well, I guess Al-Hassan might be the favorite on DraftKings. I don't have the prices up right now, but we got Abdul Razak Al-Hassan minus 105 versus Claudio Ribeiro minus 115. Really a toss-up fight. We have minus 700. Fight doesn't go to decision. They're both right there in the mid-range. I see this fight ending early with a knockout because that's what both of these guys do. Al-Hassan has never won a fight that's made it out of the first round. All his wins are first-round knockouts. This guy has the death touch when he can hit guys early. And Ribeiro kind of looks the same to me. I was expecting him to look a little bit better, to be honest with you, on film with this even line because people like Al-Hassan anyways. People like to bet on him. So I was expecting with an even line, this Ribeiro guy's probably going to show me something. But I really wasn't impressed with anything other than his power. He hasn't been knocked out before. Al-Hassan has, so he's got that going for him. I mean, he could have the death touch too. If he goes out there and hits Al-Hassan harder first, then he can get the first round knockout. I just think this is a fight that we have to target. I don't have a real lean on either side. I really just prefer to take the guy who's going to be lower owned if I knew that information. But if I just had to pick, if I'm making one lineup and I had to use this fight, I'd rather take the UFC vet. I'll go ahead and take Al-Hassan to get another first round knockout here. But just in general, this is going to be a fight that I want in almost every GPP lineup that I create, because if it ends in the first round, it doesn't matter who wins. They're going to be on the optimal lineup. Who do you like in this one, Monk?
I mean, I 100% agree. You got to have them in your lineups here. And at 8,300 and 7,900, that's what these salaries are. Al-Hassan is at 83. It's so easy to get to, and the potential value here is crazy. Now, unfortunately, if you go 50-50 ish, you're going to be throwing 50% of those entries away because someone is getting knocked the hell out. So in the first round, most likely, like you said, 11 first round KO victories for Al-Hassan. Personally, I think we can get some value on Al-Hassan here. I think Ribeiro is actually going to be higher owned. This is just my prediction. I think Ribeiro is going to be higher owned. Al-Hassan is 1-4 in his last 5. People love to hate on this guy. He's got the huge knockout power, but in DK, he has Derek Lewis syndrome. He scores very poorly per minute, but huge per win numbers. 125.4 is what he scored in his last fight. In his career, 126.89, and he's just 5-5. So as of now, in his last 5, he's averaging just 2 points a minute. But if he does get that death touch, like you said, man, it is over with. So I think we can get some leverage on Al-Hassan here. I think Ribeiro is going to be higher owned because he's not 1-4 in his last 5, and a lot of people are going to be picking him this week. I'm going with the UFC vet. I originally thought Ribeiro early in the week, but I'm switching. I'm going with Al-Hassan now. I really think he can. I got to go with the UFC vet against the newcomer here. So give me Al-Hassan, especially at 8,300. He's $260 cheaper than his average salary, guys. $260 under his average salary. Get one of these guys in your lineups and hopefully get more Al-Hassan than Ribeiro.
Yeah, I think I like that take. Since he's going to be the higher priced fighter and possibly the underdog heading into the fight, I would think you're right that this Ribeiro kid's going to be the higher owned fighter. So I don't hate a 60-40, 65-35 type of take on the Al-Hassan here. So that's probably who I'll be rooting for to get that first round knockout. But either way, this should be a banger. Both guys want to go out there and strike. And I don't think that the judges will be needed here. Hopefully, anyways, because
I would hope not, man. Can you imagine a third round between these two guys? That might be just awful.
Oh man, yeah, that's what I said in the Buckley fight too. Buckley Al-Hassan, but yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, this one's just first round and done type of fight though, because that should be fun. But all right, next one on the card, we have the biggest favorite on the card, Umar Nurmagomedov, minus 800 against Raoni Barcelos, plus 575. I never thought I'd see a plus 575 next to Raoni Barcelos, to be honest with you. I mean, not only is he just, he is a really good fighter everywhere. He's a really good striker. He's a really good wrestler. He's a really good grappler. He's getting up there in age, but we haven't seen anything from him to really warrant a plus 575 against anybody. But Umar Nurmagomedov is probably the future. He probably will be the champion in this division one day. He's the full package. He can strike, but his grappling, his wrestling is top notch, and he probably does win this fight, getting at least 2 or 3 rounds done through the mat. I just can't justify a minus $800 price tag because I mean that's indicating that he's going to win almost 90% of the time. I mean, you got to factor in injuries are going to happen sometimes. He could get a disqualification. He needs them in the head while he's down. I mean, one of the two of the judges could lay this plus 575 on Barcelos and throw it to him. We
That's
just don't
such a
know.
judge
So,
move too.
so yeah, for betting, this is just dog or pass for me all around. But I do think DraftKings is the place to get your exposure to Umar because he's a scorer. He goes out there and he can get takedowns when he wants them against most guys. I don't know if he can here, but that's just his game. As he goes out there, he gets takedowns. He had 5 takedowns against Morozov. He had in his last fight almost 12 minutes of top control. That's just the type of style that he has. He scored 105 DraftKings points twice and then 112 in the other win. I just think he's probably going to score, 90 plus if he's able to get it done, but 100 plus is definitely in the realm of possibilities, especially if it's happening on the ground. So I will say that Umar is my preferred DraftKings play. That's my favorite way to get any type of investment in him this week. But I won't count Barcelos out. I might throw one lineup of Barcelos in there because he will be low owned. We'll never see him at this price tag again. He's too good. He could go out there, get a finish on the feet or the ground, to be honest with you. So I might take one of my 20 shots and throw it on the Barcelos side because this line is just a little bit off. But how do you see this one going down, Monk?
Yeah, it's very disrespectful, but I mean it's disrespectful on paper, but when it comes to the octagon, like what's really gonna happen here? Like I just think Umar's gonna smash. Honestly, I'm with you 100%. I think he's the future of the division. He only has 3 fights so far, almost 5 points a minute, 107 per win, allows half a point per minute. That's it. Scores a ton of points, takedowns, control time, as you would expect with the last name, like Nurmagomedov, but he also scores a bunch striking. Barcelos, let's see, where did it go? He's landed in his past 5 fights, 5.84 significant strikes landed per minute. He's allowed 4.97 per minute. So he's landing 5, almost 6 and getting hit with 5 back. So I think Umar's going to be able to, I think he's going to be able to find the takedown, whether it's right off the bat or eventually. I know Barcelos has allowed 1 takedown in his career. That's it. But who's he been fighting in his last 5? Trevin Jones, Victor Henry didn't land any takedowns against him. Timur Valiev didn't land any. Khalid Taha, Said Nurmagomedov, like these guys aren't wrestlers like Umar Nurmagomedov is a wrestler. So I'm expecting a basically domination from Nurmagomedov. He could get it done early. I'm fine with that. I'd almost prefer a decision win with rinse and repeat takedowns or even better, just mauling ground control time. He's in his last in his 3 fights rather, 98.5% of all grappling time in Umar's fights he has controlled. Give me all those points. Give me all those ground and pound shots that he's going to land, and maybe even a possible submission here. I think Umar just gets it done, man. And at 9,300, he's 233 under his average salary. He's not the most expensive fighter on this card. He's going to be high owned, but best believe, I mean, he'll be in a ton of my lineups. I don't know how much Umar and Rebecchi I can get to this week. I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea, but I bet you 30% of my lineups are going to have Rebecchi and Nurmagomedov in them. So I'm big on these high salary guys this week.
Yeah, I think that Umar and Rebecchi and Argueta are going to be the chalk stack, 3-man stack of the week.
Dude.
I think that's where you want to start with your cash game lineup. But That's what most people are going to be doing in their GPPs as well. So you want to think about that as you're building lineups. You want to try and get different. If you're using those 3 in a lineup, you really want to somehow get different elsewhere. Maybe don't use the whole 50,000 if that's possible. I haven't really built lineups yet this week, so I'm not sure what they look like, but I do think those are going to be the 3 most popular fighters on the slate.
It's going to be difficult to get away from at least 2 of those 3. I mean, if you're trying to be different, you're going to have to, pick one, pick Rebecchi, pick Nurmagomedov, pick Argueta. But man, it's hard to get away from all 3, 2 of them at least.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if price doesn't matter to me, then Rebecchi would be my favorite play out of all 3. But if I need to save the money and go down to Argueta and not get either of those two top guys, I think that's going to make me a lot different than the rest of the field. I'm not afraid to do that.
For sure. And last thing on this one, to get different, if you're on the Barcelos side for DraftKings, he has 2 losses in his last 5. His average points scored per loss, 55.77. That's first on the entire card. That's a huge number. That means he's scoring 55, almost 56 in his losses. So that's pretty damn good, in my opinion.
He's a pretty damn good fighter. This line is
Yeah.
crazy, but that's just how good Umar is. Can't wait to go out there. This is going to be a real test for Umar. If he can go out there and look like a minus 800 against Barcelos, then just give this kid the belt. All right,
exactly.
Next one on the card, we got Ketlin Vieira minus 120 against Raquel Pennington plus 100. Not a fight I really like for DraftKings. I think I'll more so take a stand on this one and be on the Vieira or pass side. I just don't see there being a whole lot of action in this fight. I think it'll be a slower pace striking match. Volume will probably be close in this one, but I do favor Vieira in the wrestling department, offensively and defensively. And I just think the shots that she's going to be throwing on the feet are going to be hurting Pennington more than the shots Pennington is throwing. So I'm siding with Vieira. I think she's more likely to get a finish as well. So that's why I would prefer her on DraftKings. But I think the winner in a decision probably scores 70 to 80 points, and that's probably not going to get it done. But how do you see this one going down, Monk?
Man, yeah, cash, I don't mind either side of it if you're looking for just a mid-range, $8,000 play. I actually like Pennington better for DraftKings. Her stats are better in every single category, whether that means scoring per minute, score per win, points allowed in a loss. Pennington allowed 65 in her last loss. Vieira is averaging 101 points given up in her last 2 losses over her last 5. So I think Vieira gives up more points. But if like you said, if this is just going to be a kind of a lull, stand-up striking kind of affair, I'm 50-50 on it. I'll pick Pennington just because I think she has the bit better numbers, especially on the feet. But the takedown control time points scored per minute is actually very close in the last 5. But the points allowed in those categories is Pennington's allowing far more points in the takedown and control time area than Vieira is. So if Vieira wants to take her down, she should be able to win this fight relatively boring and relatively easily with Raquel's 62.5% takedown defense. But if this is going to be a stand-up, give me Rocky to score like 85 points, 85 points in a win, and probably 10xing her salary, but not necessarily making the optimal lineup. So I'm not expecting a finish here at all, but give me Pennington for the win, I guess. I'll pick a dog this week. How about that?
And maybe 80 or 85 points from her could get it done.
It
at
could.
Her price tag. I'm just going to be targeting that Al-Hassan and Ribeiro fight so much more, and I don't think I'm going to have to get both of those fights into my lineups. So I don't want to take this fight and throw lineups into the pot by taking both sides. So it'll be just Vieira or pass for me. And I'll probably be more so on the pass of the whole fight, to be honest with you. But I am taking Vieira to win. I do slightly favor her in this matchup. All right, next one on the card, we have Puna Soriano minus 150 against Roman Kopylov plus 130. Both of these guys are primarily strikers, but Soriano does have a wrestling background. I think it would be very smart of him to use that in this fight. But how do you see this fight going down? Do you have a lean in this one? Because I've kind of been going back and forth lately.
I'm leaning Soriano big. I've been big on this guy ever since he came into the UFC. I got served when he fought Nick Maximov. I was just not shell shocked, but just like sitting there with my head down, like what's his name from Narcos in that meme, just on the bench. That was me when I had tons of Soriano against Maximov, and he did nothing at all. Luckily, Roman Kopylov has not shown to be to score a ton of points via takedowns and control time, which is what Maximov does, which is what Brendan Allen did for the most part in that fight as well. Kopylov scoring only 0.14 points per minute in those two categories put together in the UFC, which is next to zero. Might as well be zero. That's about what Puna scores. He scores a little more than that, but Puna allows almost 2 points per minute in takedowns and control time so far. Add on the reversals, we're at like 2.25 points per minute. That is extremely poor. Kopylov would be smart to go to just wrestle in this fight. 100% wrestle. That would probably be the smart choice. Is he going to do it? Probably not. Can he do it? Unlikely. So I'm big on Soriano here. 3.27 points a minute, 112 per win in his 3 UFC wins. Give me all of that. In my opinion, he has the third highest ceiling when you throw in like standard deviation and whatnot. Third highest ceiling at almost 131 points. Give me all that. Kopylov, a very low ceiling because he only has 1 win, and he scored 80 points in that win against Alessio Di Chirico. Granted, it was a great win. 3rd round KO TKO. You absolutely love to see it. 2 guys really going at it there, and one just dies at the end. But as far as DraftKings goes, I mean, 80 points is unacceptable, even at 7,700. So give me Puna Soriano, hoping for the early finish. That's how I'm going for this one here. If it goes longer than first, second round, I'm going to be kind of sad. So again, I'll be the guy in the meme. For some reason, I can't remember Pablo Escobar's name. There we go. I'll be Pablo Escobar if Soriano doesn't win early here.
I like that. I'm on the Soriano side as well. I just think that Kopylov is the better all-around striker, the much faster striker. And if this fight does stay on the feet, I think he's live to win a decision. I think it'd be very close. Volume-wise, I do favor Soriano in the power department, though. I think he's more likely to get an early knockout and really break the slate. And as I mentioned, I think it would be smart of him to go out there and wrestle, because I don't think Kopylov would really have anything to offer off of his back. And we always like wrestlers on DraftKings. Soriano is plus 150 inside the distance. So it's going to be more so Soriano or pass for me. I won't X Kopylov out of my lineups just because I don't like underdogs on this card. And I don't hate him if he's the last spot in there. But there are 2 $7,700 fighters this week with Kopylov and Strickland. So I would rather just take the Strickland side personally. So that's how I see that one going down. I got a question here asking about rules for the optimizer. So over at DFS Army, when I'm doing the optimizer, I'll go in, I'll set the lineups at 150. If that's how many I'm doing, you can go up to 300 if you want to, if maybe your wife plays as well. But I always start with 2 unique lineups, or 2 unique players, which means that your best lineup that it gives you, it'll have 2 different players in your second best lineup. If I'm making 20 or less lineups, I like to have that as 1 unique fighter. So it could be, I have a lineup with Rebecchi in it, and then the next best lineup could just be Umar instead of Rebecchi. You're only changing 1 instead of that. So I would say the less lineups you're making, the less uniques that you want. I would put some randomization in there, especially if you're not changing any projections, just because you don't want to have the same lineups everyone else is going in there and creating. So I would do, between 3 and 7% randomization is usually where I keep it personally. But I also like to change the projections myself. I'll go in there and sort by fantasy points per dollar. And if somebody looks either too high in the rankings to me or too low, I'll just change the projection by a little bit to get that where I like it. So there is no correct way to set up the optimizer. And I'd say that I'm not one of the best optimizer guys out there. I'm more so into hand building and getting guys that I think make sense in a lineup. I don't know how to manipulate an optimizer to get it to do 150 lineups that I would hand build quite yet, but I'm still working on it. So work on it yourself, do whatever works for you. There's different back testing stuff you could do as well and try out past cards. So go in there, dfsarmy.com, use promo code sleeveless, try it all out for yourself. All right, next one on the card, we have the co-main event. Dan Ige minus 125 against Damon Jackson plus 105. And I think this fight is a good one to target because it's a mid-range fight that probably takes place on the ground for the most part. And I think either guy could have success there. Who do you like in this one, Monk? You have a preferred play?
Man, I think if you're telling me this takes place on the ground between Ige and Jackson, I'm trying to keep recency bias out, but it's hard to do in this case. I'm picking Jackson. I mean, the guy, the scores here, especially in the last 5, are just awful. I mean, Ige has nothing in the last 5 statistically over Jackson, except for a very big category called strength of schedule. He's lost to guys named Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, and one of my personal favorites, Movsar Evloev, who I hope we get to see fight shortly. Damon Jackson has wins over guys like Charles Rosa, Kamuela Kirk, Daniel Argueta also on this card, who is his toughest fight in his past 5. Let's just say that. And then Pat Sabatini, who's Jackson's biggest notch on his belt, lost to Ilia Topuria. No shame there. I was all over Jackson at the beginning of the week. I'm having a hard time getting over the strength of schedule, man, to be honest. I think if Jackson's going to have trouble landing takedowns like he did against Daniel Argueta, like, what's this going to look like? The longer this goes, it obviously favors Ige. He's got to have the cardio advantage over Jackson here, as we've seen. Jackson scores very well, 4.3 points a minute, triple digits, 100 points per win. And if you score 100 points in DraftKings, take salaries out of it entirely. You score 100 points in DraftKings, you make the optimal lineup like 80% of the time. So a very good number. You put up 100 points in DraftKings. And at 7,800, you put up 100 points in DraftKings, you're probably going to, that percentage goes up probably to like 85, 90. So scores very well, allows a ton of points, though. That's the issue with Jackson. 2.39 points per minute in takedowns and control time. Meanwhile, Ige allowing 1.23 points per minute in those categories. If you're a guy who likes recency bias, you got to be all over Jackson here. I like Jackson's potential score, but man, I think the longer this goes, Ige could just maybe start to take over. I'm worried about his score though, but at 8,400, it really doesn't matter how worried I am. So I'm going to have both of these guys here. I'm picking Jackson officially for an underdog pick, one of my very few on the card. Jackson rostered because he's cheaper and has better DraftKings potential. But man, this fight's going to be great. It's one of the ones I'm looking forward to most. But the fight's probably going to be Action Jackson. I don't know, man. This one's tough for me.
I'm definitely cool with Jackson, more so on DraftKings. That's where I like him. Yeah. But I do favor Ige in this matchup because I think he's the better striker. I also slightly favor his wrestling. I just give the grappling edge to Jackson. And if I'm wrong about the wrestling, then that's Jackson's path. When he wins, he scores well on DraftKings. So I think that's the place to get your investment to Jackson because he is an underdog. If he wins, he probably not only 10Xs, but he can score 90 plus points, maybe 100 plus points. And that's what we like in our underdogs. So I'm totally fine going down to Jackson if I need him. I would say if I'm hand building, I probably start with Ige, see what I can do. And then if I need to drop down to Jackson and get Ige out of there, then I'm just fine doing that and hoping that this is a grappling heavy fight and the winner scores over 10X. But I'll take Ige to get the win. I won't commit to him being my higher owned of the two, though. If I have more Jackson than Ige, I'm cool with that on a card where I'm not picking underdogs. All right. We got the main event. We have Nascimento Imavov minus 110 against Sean Strickland minus 110 as well. We got a pick and fight here, but on DraftKings, Imavov is 8,700 because he was supposed to face Kevin Gastelum, where he was going to be a bigger favorite. And then we have Strickland at 7,700 in a pick and fight. So I would say those numbers on DraftKings are going to lean me over to the underdog. I would rather just take that value there if this is a pick 'em fight. I don't know that I agree with the line being a pick 'em fight. I think I slightly favor Imavov here because he is the one who trained for a 5-round camp. I think he's the more dangerous fighter everywhere. But Strickland is the higher volume striker. He's the better boxer of the two if he can avoid taking some big shots. So I think in a decision, it could be real close and maybe even over to the Strickland side. We got 5 rounds to work with here. So at 7,700, I would think Strickland pays it off, especially easier than Imavov will at 8,700. So it's kind of all leading me to prefer Strickland here on DraftKings, even though I'm picking him to lose. But who do you like in this one, Monk?
Yeah, this one, I like Imavov, but I was all over Strickland at first, but I think Imavov's going to win, but I agree with you 100%. The DraftKings value is on Strickland here. He's the better scorer, 3 points a minute, 100 points per win. We already talked about how important that was, especially at a lower salary, like 7,700. So yes, he is $200 more than Gastelum would have been at 7,500. So it's kind of an optical illusion that DraftKings is like, oh, we're getting good value on Strickland. Yeah, but we're paying $200 more than we technically should be against an $8,700 fighter. But that's a different conversation. I think Strickland has a very high ceiling. Imavov's numbers are just subpar. He has made the optimal lineup twice, but he hasn't even scored 100 points. He scored 98 against Shabazian at 8,500, made optimal, and he was 7,700 against Ian Heinisch. Wow, talk about looking back and having, hindsight being 2020, 94 points at 7,700. He made optimal there. So he's not scoring that 100 points. He's not scoring very well. 2.63 points a minute. Again, we have to go back to that number that I personally can't get away from. I don't know if chat is on the side of this number or not, but replacement fighters winning at just 35% and their opponents winning at a 61% rate. Like, that's a gigantic there's a vast space between those numbers. That is a huge gap that I just can't get over. So I'm leaning Imavov. I'm leaning Imavov for the win. I will have more Strickland and DraftKings, though, for sure. At 7,700, I'll be higher on Strickland. He's averaging 103 points per decision win in his last 3 decision wins. He scored 92 in a split decision. I mean, these are probably 5-round fights, but he's got another one right here. He's not cutting as much weight. It's going to be close, man. So I like Strickland for DFS, but I'm leaning Imavov for the win. Like 55-45 is kind of my lean there.
Yeah, well said. I really don't disagree with any of that at all. I do think that this is a main event we could just get away from and hope that Imavov wins and scores 80 to 85 points.
Yep.
If that's the case, then I would think that, this fight's in 70% of total lineups. If Imavov can win and score 80 points, but we have people around him scoring 100 or more, they're going to be on the optimal lineup. It's just going to make your path to victory a lot easier if we fade this fight at high ownership. So I'm not against getting away from it, but if I had to use one of them in just one lineup, I'd rather take my shot on the underdog here because it allows me to do a lot more with my lineup in a so-called 50-50 fight.
Well said.
I do expect this to be a fun 5-round fight, though, or as long as it lasts. So looking forward to it. I think it's a pretty decent card to start off the year. Hopefully we can win and make it a really good card to start off the year. But
no doubt.
To end each card, or to end each show, we like to do a kill shot. Somebody we think might be a little bit low owned or overlooked by the field. That could be the key to the 100K lineup. Do you have somebody in mind this week, Monk?
Man, it was tough. I mean, you told me to look for this yesterday. I spent a little bit of time, more time than I'd like to admit, looking at this one yesterday, to be quite honest. I came up with Carlos Hernandez at $7,100. Nobody's talking about this guy. Nascimento is decent, but he's $9,100. So nobody's talking about him because everyone thinks he's just overpriced. So this fight as a whole, I think, in my opinion, is going overlooked. So give me the dog in an overlooked fight at 7,100. If he wins at all, he's probably scoring like 70-some points. If he wins at all, he's 10xing. If he wins at all, his chances of making the optimal lineup are pretty dang good, like 70%, whatever number I gave you earlier. So I like Hernandez here. If he wins, he could be, and I don't always use the slate breaker terminology, but he could be a real slate breaker at 7,100 here.
I like that. Yeah, I think I'll just up my Hernandez exposure all around from you pumping them up on the show. I know our Discord members really like kill shots, so you might have upped his ownership just a little bit right there.
Okay,
but I'm cool with that. I like Hernandez in all formats. Let's go Hernandez.
Nice.
I couldn't think of an underdog that I wanted to pick. I prefer to give an underdog kill shot. And then I was thinking Al-Hassan, but that fight as a whole will be pretty heavily on. So I'm going to go ahead and take Soriano. I think he could score well with an early knockout, or if he decides to go out there and wrestle heavily, he could score well that way also. So I'll take Soriano as my kill shot for the week. Maybe I'll make some lineups with both of them. So hopefully we're both right. And maybe we can make an easier optimal lineup that way with less competition.
Yes, sir.
But I would like to thank you again for coming on the show, Monk. If you have anything you want to promote, man, the floor is yours.
I really appreciate it again. Thank you so much. Love doing the show. Like I said, a lot of people in our space are MMA cappers, and they're doing like bets and stuff, which is great. More power to them. I tend to focus more on the DFS side of things. I'm a big stat guy, love the DFS stats. So anytime we get to nerd out about that, I am eternally grateful. So that's what I love to do. It's kind of my passion. In fact, you can see me doing just that over on my YouTube channel, Monk Maddox. Check the spelling. I'm sure it's in the description or the title. Find me over on Twitter, where I'm trying to drop knowledge for you guys, helping out cards every single week. I do Salary Voodoo, which is a different look at constructing GPP lineups over on the MMA Engine, which I am recording right after this. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Lou and I do a show, Lou Bet Ya, over on the MMA Engine as well. Fridays at 4:30 Eastern, Monk and Lou's Happy Hour. Come and check that out. It's a lot of fun. We give some betting and DFS advice last minute Friday night type stuff. So again, thanks for having me on, and anytime, hopefully we can do a little what I like to call no limit record deals back in the 2000s, where I'm on your show. I'll try to get you on mine. We just do both and take care of it right there. But anytime you need a guest, hit me up. And thanks, chat, as well, for sticking around. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, man. We'll get you back on the show for sure. You give me a heads up, more than a day or two, ideally a week, and then I'll be good to go for yours as well.
There we go.
Yeah, I had a good time chopping it up with you. Good luck to you this weekend, Monk. Good luck to everybody listening. Go out there and win something. We'll see you next time.